Okay, so I'm delighted to be joined by former Mayo footballer Colm Boyle. I suppose, Colm, on the back of Mayo's loss last week, the county might be a bit flat, but how are you keeping yourself away from football anyways? We'll start with that.
Yeah, I'm good there. Yeah, I can't complain. Thanks for having me on. Obviously, things are a small bit flat in Mayo now. We're getting used to being out of the championship, obviously, and with the All-Ireland semi-finals coming up this weekend, it doesn't make it much easier. So, yeah, it's definitely quiet around here this week anyway, but all good for me, thank God.
Yeah, and it's probably the earliest Mayo have been out of the championship. I know the Kildare loss in the qualifiers, I'm not sure was that at the end of June, but even probably like 2010 when the loss to Longford in the qualifiers, like it. Would you, I mean, not to even go too deep in it, but even the split season, like it does feel that bit early that maybe the county season could be extended that 2 or 3 weeks, because we only have 3 or 4 weeks, and that's it then for county action until next January.
Yeah, it is early, and like that's at a quarter-final stage. Like the team's obviously gone for a couple of weeks before this. Like, so look, it's something we're going to have to get used to. There's no doubt about it. I think what you might eventually see in time is the All-Ireland final played probably in the first week or two in August, just to maybe stretch it out a couple of weeks more. But I don't think it'll go much further than that. But yeah, from a Mayo point of view, you're right. 2018 against Kildare, I think it was pretty much around the end of June, so it would have been a similar time frame from being out of the championship. But obviously, it was the qualifiers at that stage. So yeah, it's something we're all going to have to get used to for sure.
Yeah, like what's the general sense around Mayo at the moment? Obviously, James Horan probably made his mind up quicker than maybe most people thought. He said in his interview afterwards he would think about, but it was the day after. Like, what is the general consensus of the year that's just gone for Mayo, anyways?
Yeah, well, look at it. Frustration will be a major part of it, definitely. Obviously, on the back of the All Ireland last year, you come in with renewed hope and optimism, but just the team took too many blows throughout the year, and it just all started unfortunately in the second or the first week in February with Tommy Conroy's injury, and things just really spiraled on from there. And in fairness to the lads, they did a decent league campaign. It really petered off then towards the end of the league, and obviously the league final performance against Kerry was really disappointing. But you're hoping that they're building for Galway, and it's all a process for that game. But then just in the lead up to that game, you're just hearing about all the injuries that the team is picking up, and they probably just picked up one too many. Even Oisin goes off right at the start of the second half against Galway, and it's a game they possibly, they didn't really deserve to win, to be honest. Galway were the better team. They did come back late into it, but you're still hoping that there's a 6-week gap. You're still hoping, if they get things up and running, if they get maybe a couple of boys back, but then Ryan O'Donoghue goes down, and obviously that's a huge loss. And you add that into the Tommy Conroy factor as well, and it becomes even more difficult for the team. So they look at disappointing after that. And look, the funny thing is about the Kerry game, look, probably no one really outside of Mayo or outside maybe even the team fancied them that day. But, if you're James Horan the night before that game, after 15 minutes, that's probably pretty much how you would have planned it. You're within striking distance of Kerry. They're not playing well at all, and you've got all the momentum really behind you, and they're really giving you back, coughing up possession back to you. But they just couldn't take the scoring chances that were being offered, and unfortunately, there's only so long you'll get away with that against a team like Kerry. They're going to hit their purple patch, and when they did, really the game was over.
Yeah, I mean, even looking back at that Galway game, where you see Galway now on that side of the draw with Derry, it was really opening up. Like it nearly stems back to that. Like if Mayo had just got on that side of the draw, they might have just worked their way along, build more momentum, and that who knows, they could have ended up in the final again.
Oh yeah, but it's just unbelievable how things can happen for a team. But you make your look by winning games. That's the thing about them. If you do your job on the pitch, then other things can happen off it. And look, it's opened up for Galway in a certain extent, but they still had to do their job. They still had to beat Roscommon, and Roscommon have had a fairly good record against Galway over the years, so that was a very big game for them. And then even going into that quarterfinal against Armagh, they're probably Armagh were most people's favourites going into it. So still tough game, especially on paper, and the way it turned out, like it was the game of the championship. Like obviously we were up there, and it was a super game to watch. It's what the championship needed badly in so many elements of it. And look at going into a game against Derry, like what an opportunity for both teams now to really not just get to a final, but to win this out. Because you look at Dublin and Kerry, the other side, probably we still don't know how good or how good both teams are going at the minute. We'll probably know a lot better come Sunday evening, but major opportunity certainly for Galway, as you mentioned.
Yeah, we might touch on the general sort of football championship towards the end, but to yourself, I think I was even kind of reading a bit of your column about James Horan. Were you sort of around the Mayo panel, then off it, and then James brought you back in around the 2011 mark?
Yeah, so that's exactly how it happened. Yeah, so I would have been let go at the end of 2009. John O'Mahony was in charge then. Obviously, you mentioned they won the kind of final in 2009, and you mentioned 2010 earlier on. It finished for John and that team with the loss in Pearse Park in Longford. And Mayo football, I suppose, before that, like, it was in turmoil. Like, there was huge controversy around the county with that loss, and they'd been beaten by Sligo in the kind of championship. So James came in at a time really when we were at a really low ebb. I didn't get called back into the panel initially, but the team really picked things up, and like, so many players, he changed the path really of so many players on that team, like even the likes of Keith Higgins, Andy Moore and Alan Dillon, David Clark, and got guys motoring like Ger Cafferty and Chris Baird and Tom Caniff would have been huge players for Mayo at underage, and won an All-Ireland on 21 2006. Aidan O'Shea, obviously major factors, and then he unleashed players like Lee Keegan and Killian O'Connor, and all these boys just came together in that year and won Connacht and obviously went out to Kerry in a semi-final. But it was a really, majority of that team was really young, so something was happening. I was really lucky then. James gave me the call. I had a decent club campaign in 2011. He gave me the call then to come in, and just when I came in, I could sense there was something different. There was a real drive in the team, and that was being led brilliant by James. And obviously he led that brilliantly through obviously his first term and obviously again into his second term.
Yeah, I mean, probably two games that in that first year, like, they could go either way. I mean, the London game where it goes to extra time, like, you know, if Mayo lose to London, like, you probably can't see even a way back. It's just one of those losses you can't come back from. But then the quarter-final, beating the All-Ireland champions in Cork at the time, probably that set the tone for what was to come, maybe, to give the belief that Mayo were able to compete again.
Yeah, unbelievable. Like you mentioned, Royce left there in 2011. I actually mentioned in my article that you spoke about as well. Like, I was listening to that game at home on my radio. I remember it in my parents' house, and literally couldn't believe what I was listening to as events unfolded. Like, London were all over Mayo. There was the better team, and Mayo were just hanging in that game. And Kevin McLaughlin kicks a score into injury time that brings the game into extra time that Mayo eventually win. But as you mentioned there, if Mayo lose that game, I don't know, does James survive it? It's amazing to even look back and even say that now or think it now. It would have been crazy to see what happened. But yeah, they go on then and beat Roscommon in a really wet, dreary day in Hyde Park. I think they get over the line by a point, and I think that's when players like Killian O'Connor really came to the fore, and you could see, okay, we're dealing something a bit special here. And you mentioned that win against Cork. They were obviously All-Ireland champs at the time, and huge win. A game no one would have fancied Mayo win, definitely. And to win a game like that against a team like Cork, who were just dominant really towards the end of that decade, and obviously the start of the decade. But to win that game would have given that team a huge boost. And then they play a Kerry team who they know are a couple of levels above that again, and they compete with them for long periods. But it showed them then that this is where you have to go if you want to be competing at the latter stages of the championship.
Yeah, like the following year, 2012, did you feel at the start of the year that you got to the All-Ireland final at the end? Was that on the radar that you were going to, was that fully the focus to get to an All-Ireland final? Or was it when you bet Dublin, or when was the source of the game or something like that you felt, right, we're at the top table now?
Yeah, well, it's funny, like you mentioned things opening up there for Galway this year. Like, things really opened up for us that year. Like, we played, I think it was Leitrim first round of the championship, and we played a very good Sligo team in the Connacht final. I think they won Connacht 2 years previous to that, and we just got over the line then and played down in a quarter final. So look, it's something that would always be in the back of your mind. But obviously Dublin were the Ireland champions. We played them in the semi-final, but we just really fancied our chances in that game, and we just knew, obviously the lads had the experience the year before beating the All-Ireland champions in Cork. Again, we were going into the Dublin game in 12, not really a lot of people fancying us, but we had the belief in that in that day that we could pull this off, and we did. We played really well. I think we went 8 or 9 up at one stage in that second half before Dublin really started to reel us back in, being the champions they were, obviously. And I think only for a David Clark, save against Bernard Brogan, things might have turned out very different that day. But a magical day, very memorable day, huge atmosphere in Croke Park that day. Obviously, come up against Donegal in the final. And I suppose for us, obviously a really good Donegal team, and led brilliantly by Jim McGuinness. They were probably maybe just a year ahead of us in our development. When I look back on it, they had players really Lacey and them boys, even a young Michael Murphy as it was, but Colm McFadden, who were really just on the top of their game and really were played well and did the right things in the final and just got things right. And probably for us it might have been just a year possibly too soon.
Yeah, like I don't want to nearly go because there is a good few finals that you did play in, but like what's the build up like going into an All-Ireland final, like especially that first one, like it's a completely new experience for all the players really. I think maybe Keith and Andy in 06 would have been, or maybe David Clark, a few of them would have experienced it.
Yeah, Alan Dillon as well.
Yeah, for the majority of the team, it was a completely new experience.
It was. It was mad. From what I remember of it, it was a mad enough lead up because I didn't know what to expect. But I had a crazy lead up myself because I got sick actually the morning of the semi-final. I didn't start against Dublin. I just didn't feel well. I just came down with some bit of a virus. I managed to come on for the last 20 minutes or so, but that night when I got home, I just really took a bad turn. I was really, really sick, and I actually ended up in hospital then the following day. Spent about a week in hospital just recovering. And that knocked a lot out of me. So I was just really, I didn't know where I was, to be honest. I didn't think I was going to start the final. I'd lost an awful lot of weight. I'd no training done, and I was basically just starting on a really light kind of running program the week after I got back out of hospital to try and get me motoring again and get back up to speed. But the first real training I had was the Wednesday before the All-Ireland final. I think that's the first time really I trained with the boys on a full session. So it was a very strange experience, and James backed me and he went with me, and I started the final. But yeah, it was mad because I was just literally taking it day by day and not really thinking about the final as such, but trying to get myself into contention for starting. So just doing everything I needed to do to get myself back for contention of playing that day.
Yeah, is it hard, like especially in a county like Mayo, because I mean you know well from living there and being in the team. You hear the Mayo for Sam, the fans, like the hype, I say, even around, them big games. Is it hard to completely, can you switch off? I know players say you don't listen to media, fan opinions and all that, but is it hard just completely switch off when it's an amateur sport as well? It's not like you're in a bubble where you're training every day. Like you have to go to work as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But I'd say it's the same. Most counties are like if whatever teams in their All-Ireland final this year, like the counties will be really excited and players will be obviously getting spoken to about it, and they'll be seeing social media and whatnot. So like I don't, a lot of it gets made in Mayo about it, but I think it's pretty much the same in every county, to be honest. And you're dealing with the same pressures. Obviously Mayo haven't won one in a very long time, so there is that added element to it. But that will happen someday. There's no doubt about it. But I think sometimes that gets over talked about a small bit more, because I think other players have to do the exact same thing in other counties. Say if the likes of Galway now or Derry, especially, one of those teams get to the final, like them counties really are going to go into overdrive, because it's been a while for both counties that they've been competing in an All-Ireland final. So it's just something you deal with as a player. But when it comes to the actual day itself, does it make any difference? I really don't think so. I really don't think it does.
Yeah, like even the feeling of 82,000 people, like it's hard even just to even you fully focus as well, because just even get used to the game, the atmosphere, the pitch of it for 5 or 10 minutes. Them first 5 or 10 minutes is probably just even the hype, the parade, everything, just to get to the pitch of the game might take that bit longer, is it?
Yeah, there's a certain few things in it, I suppose. All-Ireland final day, you do be out on the pitch that bit longer beforehand, because obviously you have to meet the president, and because of that you normally get brought out a couple of minutes earlier because you need to get a couple of more minutes work done. So there is a small bit more into it, but you generally enjoy that lead up to it. I used to always enjoy the parade because it was the one opportunity really you got to almost get the air back into your lungs from a tough warm up, and just to walk around and take things all in, but just to remind yourself of a couple of key parts of your game that you wanted to focus on for the first 5 or 10 minutes, just to get you through them opening few minutes, because as you said, it can be fairly manic, and most of them finals we played in, especially the Dublin ones I'm thinking of, they were chaos for the first 10 or 15 minutes. So it was about getting yourself ready for that as much as you can. But the early parts of that, like as you said, the crowd and the atmosphere, I used to enjoy that. And so you'd be walking around and you'd be seeing the crowd, and you'd just feel the energy that was out there. Like it was magical really to experience that.
Yeah, I mean, no All-Ireland final is easy to take, but was 2013 harder to take, or are they all the same? I mean, you were that bit closer to Dublin that day as well, probably putting a better performance than you did against Donegal. Like, is it just the same, or do you look back at certain ones saying, that could have happened, that,
Yeah, well, it's hard to know. Like 13-1, as I said to you earlier, I think we're a better team than 13. I think our performances all throughout the year showed that we were a better team. We were obviously playing a Dublin team in 13 who had the experience of winning 1 and 11, and we're obviously a really, really good team on top of that as well. But I think it was generally a game we played really well in and did an awful lot of things right. Did it make it any easier when we lost it? No, definitely not. But knowing that not that we gave it everything, but that we did an awful lot of things right. Just there was huge disappointment, because we felt we led that game for periods, which we probably hadn't done against Donegal the year before. So that game definitely was there for us. But unfortunately, we they got a couple of goals which made a huge difference. Small things that made a huge difference on the day.
Yeah, I mean, the following year it's Kerry in the semi-final, and it was a great first day at Croke Park as well. But we saw that day, I mean, there's a lot of talk with Croke Park and the venue and crowds and all that. There was a lot of talk going into that game, the replay in Limerick, that it shouldn't be in Limerick, it should be in Croke Park. But I mean, even from watching it, it was probably one, you always remember that game, a packed Gaelic grounds. Like, did that just show what we can have, basically? Even quarterfinals, we should be putting them into provincial grounds, because I mean, the atmosphere that day, I wasn't there, but I say it was just incredible to play in.
It was unbelievable. It's probably the best, up there with the best I played in, definitely. And you're right, there was huge controversy about it that week, obviously, with the American football was booked for Croke Park. It was a magical day. It was up there with, despite losing the game, it was up there with one of the best experiences, just because the atmosphere, it just literally felt like the crowd was in on top of you, and there wasn't a spare seat in the house. And I mentioned parades already, but that is one of the real standout parades. I remember just walking around and you could feel the energy and the noise in the crowd, and just thinking, this is absolutely unbelievable. And that was a tough one to take, losing that day. It was a type of game. I've never watched it back. It was the type of game it'd just be impossible to analyze or put any rhyme or reason to what happened. It was just both teams going absolutely full throttle for it, and so many different elements happened in the game that swung it over and back. And unfortunately for us, Kerry just got the crucial scores probably at the right time, especially towards the end of extra time. That just unfortunately had too much force on the day. But that was such a strange day, because obviously James stepped down, and you mentioned James earlier on about stepping down after the game last week. Like, I think James, once he's a decision made, he goes for it, and I think it was the same back in 14. It would have been very, I'm not going to say easy, but awful lot of managers would have said after that game, I'm going to stay on here for another year. But he's decision made that he was going, and he went straight after the game. He told us back in the hotel that he was gone, and that was a really, really tough day, because not only were we after losing a really, really tough game to lose, obviously, in our Ireland semi-final, but obviously James was gone again, and it was just huge disappointment, and you don't know, is that the end of the team or whatnot, or what's going to happen after that.
Yeah, I mean, a lot was made over the years as well. You probably again hear this, how is the kid coming back? Mayo are back in the final, all that. But do them Kerry losses, the All-Ireland final losses, make you even hungrier that you want to experience them days and right or wrong?
Yeah, well, there's not like a lot of people would have said that to me, but like my response to that would be a lot worse if we were getting bet first round of the championship and losing in qualifier games and getting absolutely nowhere near Croke Park or to play in these big games or pushing to try and win All Ireland. So that was my way of thinking about it, and I'm sure the team were thinking the same way as well. And when you have a really good group of lads like that, it makes things an awful lot easier. You know what I mean? So that's a huge driving factor. And we knew we were obviously very, very close. And we on our day we could put it up and beat anyone out there. So that, you know, all these things factor into each other. We're obviously lucky too that we had really good management teams down through the years and really good background teams that were obviously helping us to try and develop and push on as well.
Yeah, I mean, probably even typified like the 2015 semi-final against Dublin as well. I mean, I think it was 7 or 8 down with less than 10 minutes to go. Like, did that again, bit of chaos? Does that nearly solve Mayo football? Just that bit of chaos, you know, the atmosphere in Croke Park and the craziness of the games, but just, you know, to keep going until the end. Was that a big thing for this Mayo team that will probably be remembered from say 2010 to 2020, sort of that era?
Yeah, and that's something we probably did a fair bit. You know, especially down through the years. You know, you mentioned the 15 semi-finals there. We were down. I think Killeen sticks a penalty then, and Andy gets a score. I think Cluxton has a late chance to win the game, but he hits it wide. And the replay then, I think we were going really well for long periods of it, but I think the extra bit that came off the bench, we probably ran out of legs a small bit, and they take us, and obviously they go on to win the final against Kerry. But you know, we'd no real complaints. As disappointing as it was, we'd no real complaints. Obviously Dublin had that bit more than us coming down the stretch at the replay. But again, it's really, really disappointing. You lose 2 semi-finals in a row, both after replays. You're so close to getting back to the final, but it just doesn't quite happen.
Yeah, I mean, the following 2 years you do get to the finals, but it's through the back door, completely different route. Especially 17. I mean, you played, I don't know how many games that year with extra time against Derry, Cork, the replays against Roscommon and Kerry. Like, it's not ideal. Obviously, you'd rather go win Connacht and go through the front door. But did that back door even help you? You know, a lot of players say game on game they like it, or then you hear, oh, the legs are getting tired. Like, what would you have preferred, the game on game, week on week?
Yeah, it's hard to know because at our 16, like we got bet by Galway first round championship, and our confidence was seriously knocked from that. And then you are starting to ask huge question marks of both yourself and the team and where you're going. And we didn't play well after that for a long periods. Like we played, I think 16 was the year we played for Mana and Castlebar straight after that. And like we were really lucky to get out of that. Yeah. And it was a new territory for us. Playing qualifier games, playing an awful lot of teams that we'd never played really, even in league football. And that whole threat of being knocked out of the championship at a very early stage brings a kind of different pressure to it. And I think we played Westmeath after that in Croke Park, and again we were well up, but they come back at us, and we just really crawl over the line in that game. So we're going into a quarter final against Horan. You know, again, no one's really fancying us in it. And, you know, we get over the line and beat Tipperary in a semi-final. And when you get to Dublin in the final, you're kind of thinking, right, we've been through the qualifiers. We've played probably 2 or 3 more games than we might have if we'd gone the traditional route. Does that leave us in good stead? I don't know, would it make any difference either way if you've gone through the front door? But I think 17 was a funny year, and that some of the games we played were an awful lot more enjoyable than they had been in 16, because they were so mad. Like we played Cork in the Gaelic rounds in a qualifier game. Like it was a savage game of football. You know, we won it after extra time, but some of the football played was unbelievable. And then after we played Roscommon in the quarterfinal in Croke Park, which was kind of a unique game. To play Roscommon in a quarter-final in Croke Park as well. And that brought huge crowds and colours. And obviously there was huge crack around Andy, and Andy was getting stick, you know, especially in the first game. And Roscommon really should have beaten us the first day, you know, probably only for Lee Keegan. They probably would have. He really kept us in it when we weren't playing well. Then the second day we kind of, you know, we really get an awful lot of things right, and we start well, and we kind of put Roscommon to bed early. But the two semi-finals then against Kerry, two really, really good games, and for us they were not revenge for 14, but we would have spoken about it beforehand that, you know, we can't let this happen again, especially when we went to a replay. You know, we couldn't lose to Kerry again in a replay, semi-final replay. So it was great to win that game and get back obviously to a final. But it was kind of a strangely enjoyable year because we were nearly gone on so many occasions. Even the first round against Derry, I missed that game. Like we were struggling big time, and Derry probably should have put us out in the first round as well. So it was a mad couple of years going through the qualifier route.
Yeah, like, why do you think it is? Because every Mayo game, well, lots of them anyways, like no matter if you're playing, say, Derry, it's close, it's Dublin, it's close, like you're nearly at the same level no matter what the opposition. Like, why do you think that's just happened, that you always seem to make it hard on yourselves, going through that route?
Yeah, it's a funny one there, because I know, as you said it there, an awful lot of the teams we would have played probably would have been not as good as us, some of them, but we probably would have played to their level, which probably would have brought it into a real dogfight. I would say an awful lot of the teams like playing against us because we played pretty much the same way, no matter who we were playing. We weren't really going to change our style. We were generally on the front foot, attacking from everywhere. You know, we would leave space in behind on certain occasions. So forwards were probably getting space against us that they probably would have never got against other teams. You know what I mean? So they probably enjoyed that to a certain extent. But it's a tough one to explain. Look, at an awful lot of the time we were managed to able to get ourselves together and pull results out of the bag, probably in games that we didn't deserve, I would say, some of them.
Yeah, I mean, that we kind of touched on the Kildare game earlier, that the Newbridge or Nowhere is another memorable game as well.
Yeah.
I mean, that was even another sideshow. Like, you were probably just training away, but the whole country was talking about Kildare. Like, was there even? I mean, there was a stage where there was even talk that Mayo would show up in Croke Park and Kildare would. Like, was that even? I mean, it probably wasn't discussed.
No, definitely not. No. No, to be honest, it was funny. I don't remember us discussing it as a team at all. I think it was just we were told it's in Newbridge and that's it. And I think we were generally happy enough. I don't think that we were overly bothered. Obviously, as a player, when you're offered the chance to play in Croke Park, it's obviously first preference. But when we were told it was in Newbridge, it didn't overly bother me. We played their league games over the years, and what we knew, I suppose, and what we did talk about is that there was going to be a serious atmosphere for the game, and there was, like I mentioned, Limerick in 14 there. Newbridge was right up there. Like, it was really intense. And I remember coming into Newbridge as we were coming in, there were signs everywhere, Newbridge or Nowhere. There was just Kildare flags. It was like we were coming in to play an All-Ireland final. Like, they were really up for that. I remember there was crowds meeting us when we were coming out in the bus. Like, it was mad, but they created a real atmosphere and a real kind of sense of unity over it. And to have to say, it worked for them, because their team really responded to it. Really responded to it. And look, they were the better team that day. We were kind of hanging in for long periods of that second half, but I think it was Kevin Feely who kicked a massive score with about 5 minutes to go, and the place just literally erupted. And they just finished really strong after that, and deservedly beating us that day.
Yeah, I mean, Stephen Rochford left after that game, and again, two finals, a replay. Like, how would you look back on his time as well? Again, gave a lot to Mayo football, and I mean, tried to bring home the ultimate prize, but didn't in the end. But how would you look back on them 3 or 4 years with him?
Yeah, a funny one. Like, because Stephen probably, when he looks back, and I'm sure Stephen has huge ambitions to manage Mayo again, because he's a very young man, and it might be this term, but it might be the next term or the term after that. And he's a brilliant coach and a brilliant manager. And he had us playing some brilliant football. That's what I say about it. Like, he was really looking for us to move the ball quick, move it on, skip lines, and really use the boot, foot past the ball as much as we could. And we did that really well with Stephen. And he was really good in training us in that. I'd say when Stephen looks back, he'd probably be disappointed in a couple of things. The All-Ireland is obviously a big thing. Like, we got so close. And you mentioned how well we played in the finals. 17 was probably the best performance we gave in a final. Played some really good. 16, the first day, was probably worst Dublin played in a final. Really, really wet day in Croke Park. And we obviously the 2 goals in the first half, and which is obviously stuff you can't, calculate for. And we were 4 or 5 down really going in half time, having played most of the football in that half. I think we reeled them back, and obviously we needed a late score from Killian to force extra time. But Stephen can go back with huge pride in the work he did. Huge pride. Brilliant manager. And like I said, I'd be very surprised if he doesn't manage Mayo again in the future.
Yeah, cause actually I had it written down, the own goal. You did score the own goal in the final.
Yeah, I got the second one, I think. Yeah,
even when that went in, it's just hard to believe that. You rarely even see an own goal in Gaelic football. To have 2, and especially in one half. Were you think, was that in your mind at all for the next 5 minutes, or did you clear it?
It was.
How do you react to that?
Yeah, no, it was there. I won't lie, it was. And look at the major disappointment for me after that was the defending. It came from a set play. We knew Dublin were what they were going to do, and I didn't defend it well. So that was my initial real disappointment, that Dean Rock showed in front and dummied in behind, double back behind, and Jim Connolly puts it over the top. So that was kind of my initial disappointment. What happened after that was just pure freak. I think Dean Rock drops the ball, and as I'm striding, it hits my shin or my knee and just flies past David Clark. So look, that can happen, but it was my initial disappointment. But I'm not going to lie, as I was going back into position, my head was spinning, and it took definitely a couple of minutes just to kind of come around and kind of process what was after happening and realize, right, I think even the first time I got the ball after that, I might have got pulled for over carrying, because my head was still kind of spinning after the initial shock of scoring an own goal. I'd never scored an own goal in my life, and then to do it in an All-Ireland final. But once I kind of got back into the game after that, I was fine. By the second half, I wasn't even thinking about it. But the first couple of initial minutes did take a bit of time to process what was after happening.
Yeah, because again, another side story of Mayo. It's talked about is this curse as well. Again, I'm sure unless it was, I can't speak for you, but I'm sure it was never talked about in dress rooms or anything.
No, definitely not. No, we left that to everyone on the outside. No.
James Horan came back 2019, and again, did he change anything, or was it the same sort of, as you came back in 2012? Was it the same methods, or had he tweaked anything? Did you notice when he came back?
Yeah, it's a good question, actually. He would have tweaked a couple of things in regards of maybe structure around the team, and trying to make sure that we'd a +1 defender on attacks. And he was very big on pressing the ball. So in his first term, pressing the ball up top, but probably not with the whole pile of structure to it. You just literally pressed every ball and that was it. And his second term then, he was more kind of tactical in how he wanted to do it. And, there was, even if you had to show a team down the line and then get your tackles in, rather than, one man just jumping in and getting bet and the team was coming straight down the middle at you. So there was certain tweaks like that, and then trying to get maybe your +1 from slowing down the ball up top and getting a +1 from coming back through the lines. So there was definitely tactical stuff in that. But I would say after 19, we got bet by Dublin in the semi-final, where they hit 2-6 in a 12-minute spell at the start of the second half, really, and the game was over. I think after that, I think James made the conscious decision that to compete with Dublin, especially over 70+ period, that he needed to get more athleticism into the team. He needs to get more runners into the team. And over the next 2 years, I think that's what you saw happening. I think the profile of player that James was looking for was there and readily available, and he developed that on, and they come into the team. And I think what happened, we would have always been a really good kick passing team and looked to move the ball through the boot. I think the style kind of changed then, was that we ran the ball an awful lot more because of the profile of player we had, and especially the runners from deep, some savage runners with power and pace. So you're going to use them and you're going to run the ball through the hands an awful lot more. And I think that's what we would have done in the couple of years after that, most definitely last year.
Yeah, because of course he leaves without the All-Ireland, but he's left the team. Well, he's reinvigorated the team as well. Your Tommy Conroy's, Ryan O'Donoghue's, Oisin Mullins, Owen McLaughlin's. There's more as well. Matthew Horan. He's given a lot of chances to players. To throw them in, and they have that 2 or 3 year experience now under their belts, even with the new management coming in. So it's kind of, the team is developing, but they have experience at the same time.
Yeah, and he deserves huge credit for that, to bring a team on. Especially when so many players went to the end of 2020, like a lot of people would have wrote Mayo off after that, but he brought so many boys on, and he was developing them and showing them the way and showing them what standards needed to there to get yourself to an All-Ireland final, and just giving them boys the general confidence and the guidance that they can perform and they can compete with the best that's out there. And like you said, that they're there now, for whoever comes in next. Them boys aren't going to need to be developed or anything like that. They're there, and you'll be hoping that one or two might come in and add to it as well. But the likes of your Tommy Conroy's and your Ryan O'Donnell's, O'Shea Mullins, is like James deserve huge credit for the way he brought them through and the confidence he developed into them to perform on the biggest stages.
Yeah, I mean, last year's All-Ireland final, I mean, get over the line against Dublin finally, in a way. I think it was 10, I think with the 2012 was the last time in the championship Mayo beat Dublin. It's Tyrone in the final, like they've taken care of Kerry. Like, was that really a missed opportunity? I mean, they're all missed opportunities anytime you lose an All-Ireland final, but even the fact that Dublin and Kerry were out of the equation, was there even, there's always pressure, but is that one that probably might be looking back on as a missed opportunity?
Well, look, the way I'd look back on it, Dart, that Tyrone were the better team. They were the better team than us. And what Tyrone had, they had a team that was together a long time, and they played in 2018 in a final against Dublin, and they probably learned an awful lot from that, so they choose experience. And not that they were coming under the radar, they were after beating Kerry in a semi-final, but probably more people were talking about us coming into the final. But they got, I mentioned about Donegal in 2012, they got so many things right on the final, and they hit us for goals. And if you look at the 2 goals they scored, I think they would have been practicing them 2 goals and an awful lot in the lead up for the game, just the way they worked out for them. So they got their stuff right on the day. For us, when you look back at that game, we didn't play obviously how we would want to, but if we get one of them goal chances or 2 of them goal chances, then it's a different game. That was the reality. We'd 4 gilt-edged goal chances. They didn't take one of them. I think Tyrone had 3 and scored 2. That was the difference initially. And Tyrone, once they got in front, they defended really well, and they played really well, and they did enough to see the game out. So look, I can't have any complaints because Tyrone were the better team on the day. So I can't really say it would hurt any less or more than any of the other games. But disappointing disappointing to lose it, obviously. And what was disappointing after was kind of not the reaction, but as James in particular came in for an awful lot of criticism after the game, in kind of the weeks and the months. And look, he wouldn't have been human if it didn't affect him, or if he didn't see it, or if he wasn't listening to it. So that was kind of disappointing to see, because the team certainly didn't intend to go up and not play as well as they could have, and James left no stone unturned in prep for the final. So that was kind of disappointing to see. But yeah, just to lose another final obviously was the main disappointment.
Yeah, I mean, did you know at the start of the year that was going to be it for you? Had you made up your mind? Had you an idea at the back of your head, or was it afterwards to reflect and decide then?
Yeah, I was. So at the start of 2021, sorry, I knew it was the end for me. In February 2020, just pre-COVID, I'd done my cruise ship just in the game or 2 before things actually shut down. So I managed to get back just really for the start of championship. Obviously, championship started in November that year, but we didn't get any game time and didn't get any into I was in the first 2 championship squads, the 26, but I wasn't in any after that. So as the last started to leave the panel, then I was seriously considering going, and it was kind of a conversation from James that changed my mind on it a small bit, and I was ready to go then for the following year. But certainly there was no doubt at the start of 2021 that this was the last year for me. Definitely there was things were it was getting harder and harder to keep up with them boys in training, and obviously game time was becoming less and less, probably especially because the way we were playing a lot more running game with pace and power and stuff like that. And obviously at 35 years of age, that probably wouldn't have been my biggest attribute then. But yeah, there's no doubt about it. Going into the final that day, I knew it was going to be the last day I was pulling on the jersey. So to finish in that way was obviously really disappointing.
Yeah, like how do you look back on the career? I mean, as you said, like, you know, the gated grounds, the new, like playing in them sort of games, like what should be, I suppose, your memories of playing for Mayo?
I just unbelievable pride really to play it for so long. Like if you told me, when I came back in at the end of 2011, what was going to happen over the next 10 years, like, I would have said you're absolutely mad, because it was a crazy experience, but so many memorable days. And even the All-Ireland finals that we mentioned, like they were magical days to be part of, and real experiences that you can only get on a football pitch that you're never ever going to get again realistically. So there's huge pride, and just the people you meet along the way and the boys I played with, like the crack and the camaraderie. And that's probably the most thing you miss about it, is actually going into the training, the dressing room with them boys, and just the crack, having the crack and meeting them boys 3 times a week. When you come out of that environment, it's very, very strange, and you kind of come away from that. And it's amazing. I'm out with, well, officially probably 6 months of playing time, but maybe a bit longer than that. But it's amazing. I feel like I've been gone for years. It's crazy, because once you're out of it, you're really, really out of it, and you don't know what's going on. But magical times to be part of, magical days, and it's great times and great memories to look back on for sure.
Yeah, I mean, looking ahead to, I mean, this weekend is the All-Ireland football semi-finals. And Derry Galway is the first one Saturday. Like, as I said, we were at the double header there, it'll be a couple of weeks ago by this weekend. Like, Galway were cruising, and they seem to have this habit of nearly, I said, Mayo nearly came back. Roscommon only were 3 behind by the end, even though the Galway were 8 or 9. And then obviously Armagh did catch them and got extra time. But will Galway almost take more from that penalty shootout win than they would have a 4 or 5 point win? Just even just coming through a game like that. I mean, the lift did nearly give you coming off that pitch.
Yeah, it's actually a good point, Dara. It might actually be more benefit to them in the longer. It's hard to know. That's probably the one concern Park Joyce will have, just that they're letting teams back into the game in the final stretch. But what he'd be really happy with is the response in extra time. I thought they were the better team in extra time. I thought they responded really, really well to the setback of conceding 2 goals. And then when they concede that goal from Rory Grugan, I thought that was game. I didn't see them coming back into it. And they've done really what a Galway team hasn't done for a hell of a long time, is really fight back. And McKilly McDade was exceptional in that last 10 minutes, especially, like, to kick the goal and to hit the point that gets them level and bring them to penalties. Like, that game will do them absolute wonders, and bring them on. It's probably the biggest win in Galway football since 2001. That's how big of a win it was, and it sets them up now, as we mentioned earlier on, into a semi-final against Derry, and they're going to have absolutely no fear going into that game. They've obviously played each other in the league up in Derry, and I remember watching that game. I was up in RT that day, and it was the big game in Division 2, and we were watching that game. We watched the full game. They were miles the better team that day, so they won't have any fear of Derry. Obviously, Derry have come on in leaps and bounds since that, and are playing a completely kind of style of football in the championship. So, yeah, it's going to be fascinating for Sunday for sure, or for Saturday.
Yeah, because Derry did beat Clare convincingly, and they took a lot of plaudits, and rightly so. But you probably have to do factor in, like, Clare were very poor that day. They just seemed, they were out their depth. So the positives for Derry is they're not coming in cold, that they've beaten 3 Division 1 teams in Ulster. But again, the expectation levels, like, I think probably a bit like Armagh going to that Galway game, that a lot of people probably will be talking more so Derry than Galway. It probably is the consensus, maybe, that more people will be tipping Derry in this one.
Probably will, yeah, they probably will. And it's a funny one. If you're Derry, if you're looking for positives from the quarter final, it's how ruthless they were when the goals opened up. And that's one thing I think Derry, even in this semi-final, they don't tend to score a huge amount of points. Yeah. So when that goal opens up for them, they really have to go for it. And they were ruthless, and obviously to hit 5 goals against Clare probably changed up their style of play a small bit, in the fact that they're committing an awful lot of bodies forward. They were generally pressing high up the pitch when Clare had the ball, especially from kickouts, and probably leaving a lot more space in behind than they had been doing in the Ulster Championship. So I don't see that happening on Saturday. I think they revert back to their general style of play. But I think it was good to them just to get up to Croke Park, get familiar with the surroundings there again, and there'll be nothing new to them the next day now when they get up there. And I think they'll go back to kind of their more tried and trusted game plan and really try and frustrate Galway. And like some of the matchups there the next day, I don't know, is it going to be Rogers and Comer or Chrissy McCaig and Shane Walsh? Like if it is, that's, you know, they're mouth-watering prospects, you know, and obviously Shane McGuigan maybe and Sean Kelly down the other end. So really whoever comes out on the top of them battles could be huge. But we saw the last day for Galway, and that's one thing you could probably see is different about this team, that they're not relying on the Conroy, Walsh and Comer in the last two games especially. It's been, you know, your Rob Finnerty, Matthew Tierney and Killy McDade that really pulled them through. So that has to be a huge promising thing for Galway going forward.
Yeah, I mean, is there argument to say that Rory Gallagher is the best manager in the country at the moment for maximising what he has, maximising every probably last bit of that Derry team? Because I remember actually in COVID, I interviewed Christy McCaig, and I was talking about the Tailteann Cup and it being introduced and what he thought was now they're in an All-Ireland semi-final and, you know, 70 minutes away from playing in the big one. Like, you know, the turnaround in Derry football has been huge.
Unbelievable, yeah. And look, it is a strong argument to say that he is, because he could, like Jack O'Connor is an unbelievable manager. We all know he is, but you can see even he struggled a tiny bit at Kildare to get the best out of them. So, you know, sometimes it can be difficult for certain managers. But yeah, look, Rory Gallagher has done a huge job. There's no doubt about it in Derry, and he's brought this team to a level I don't know. Did Derry even believe they could get to the level they're at? But even their conditioning, their confidence is flowing. Even players like Garrett McGinless, who I didn't even realise was 27, 28 years of age. I thought he was a lot younger. Like, we haven't seen a whole pile of him really at senior county footballer. Like he's one of the best players in the championship so far. So he's obviously top class coach. There's no doubt about it, and he's getting the best out of this Derry team.
Yeah, I mean, before we go on to the other one, if you had to pick a winner in this one, I mean, the bookies have it literally nearly both at even. So who would you be siding with?
It's so hard to call it. Yeah, it's literally it's so hard to call it. I think if Galway can just really get to grips with Shane McGuigan, Derry could have, you know, find the scores hard to come by. So look, it's really, really tough. I might give us hesitant not to go away to our neighbours maybe on that one.
Yeah, it should be a close one anyways. And Sunday, you'd hope anyways that, you know, Dublin and Kerry usually do serve up, so, you know, a good game of football. So we're hoping for the same. I mean, does it almost, not to disrespect the other side of the you know, the draw, but does this almost feel like, you know, not the All-Ireland final, but whoever wins this one will be thinking that, you know, they're going to go on and win the final then?
Yeah, it's a strange one. I don't know. Look, at it's probably that's the way it'll be looked from the outside. I think from inside both camps, whoever wins this game will obviously have huge confidence. But I still think they could be slightly vulnerable in a final. And if it is a Galway or Derry, then, you know, they can give them huge problems. There's no doubt about it. But the game itself, like, it's really hard to know. Obviously, we don't know Con O'Callaghan, if he's going to be fit. Didn't look right at all. I was very surprised he played as long as he did. Obviously, he gets the goal, which was a magic goal, but I think for long periods of that game, he didn't look comfortable. So I think Jack O'Connor said he was going for a scan on his ankle after the game. So you could pretty much say that even if he plays the next day, he probably has little to no training done again in the lead up to this. And I don't think he did a huge amount in the lead up to the Mayo game with the injury he had as well. So you could be talking about Clifford maybe gone through the last 6 weeks with not a lot of training done. So is he going to be at full tilt the next day? It's very hard to say. Again, same with Con O'Callaghan and James McCarthy. So these are all factors that have to be factored in. So it's very hard to kind of gauge. You know, it could come down to who basically O'Callaghan and Clifford, who's the freshest and who's the fittest and who's firing the most. Dublin, I think they got criticised after the Cork game, and I think it was a funny one because, you know, they did what they had to do. I think Dublin at this stage, they're fed up of really just annihilating teams. You know, they've been doing it for so many years. It was so flat and dead in Croke Park. We're expecting them to be absolutely sensational every time they tug out. they just did what they had to do. They kicked 21 points. They were without their best attacker. They were without one of their most inspirational players in James McCarthy. So they're going to be primed and ready for Kerry. So it's really going to be fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, we probably expect Clifford and Con to play. I mean, probably Clifford will play. I don't know what Con's situation is, but would Con be a bigger loss to Dublin than Clifford would be to Kerry at this moment in time?
Yeah, it's Jesus. Yeah, that's a big question. I don't know, because Con is he's doing something different than the other attackers for Dublin. Is that, you know, people talk about him being the focal point, but he's so direct. Like when he gets the ball, no matter where he gets the ball on the pitch, it's almost a goal chance, you know, because he's so direct and he creates so much for that Dublin forward line. Clifford, you know, would Kerry be better equipped with the, you know, say if Clifford was out, Killian Spillane, Tony Brosnan to come in. It's so hard to know. Look at both teams. I look for the sake of the viewers and the neutrals, I hope both players are on the pitch, because you want to see the two of the best players in the country just going at it and going head to head for their teams. That'll make for a better occasion and a better game.
Yeah, I mean, even the benches could come into play here. I mean, the Dublin bench is looking more inexperienced, we'll say, by the year. It's probably going to continue like that. Whether the players are coming through, we don't know. But if a Kerry have, you know, your Killian Spillanes, your Tony Brosnans, you know, a few of these players, it could come down to that, because Killian Spillane seems to be scoring anytime he's on the field for Kerry, which is a huge plus for them.
Yeah, and I think he'll be holding him at all costs. So he's so deadly off the bench. I think James O'Donoghue said it lately. Like he literally doesn't do a warm up and he comes in and he just bang, he's into it straight away. 2 or 3 points. You're almost guaranteed if that from him off the bench. I think it's going to be really interesting about Jack Barry. Is he back? He's a big player for Kerry, and he's been a big player in picking up Brian Finton recently. So if he does come in, does he come in for David Moran or Jeremy O'Connor? Because I thought David Moran was brilliant the last day. But again, in the back of Jack O'Connor's head, he might be thinking, if I can hold David Moran for the last 20-25 minutes, like he would be a huge player coming into that game towards the home stretch. So all these things really are going to be really interesting. And you mentioned that the forwards Kerry have there to come off the bench, they might just make the difference for them. Dublin probably not as strong in that sector as they would have been over the years, even though they still have really good players, obviously with the likes of Paddy Small and whatnot coming off the bench. But yeah, these things are going to be really, really interesting. But you might think Kerry might, if everyone is fit, might have the slight advantage in that area.
Yeah, because I think Kerry are the favourites, which, I mean, for Dublin, I say it could be the first time, maybe that 2011 final. I can't remember if Kerry were the favourites. Like, to not be favourites for Dublin in a championship game in Croke Park is a strange one. So, is this a big moment for Kerry? Maybe like Dublin in 2011 to, you know, go on now. This is their time and kick on.
Oh, huge! Like realistically, this is a game Kerry have been waiting for since probably they lost to Dublin in 2019. That's that replay in 19, and definitely when they lost to Tyrone last year, you know, they have been waiting for a really, really big game in Croke Park, and if they didn't get over the line against Dublin on Sunday, it'll be a huge blow for them. There's no doubt about it, and it would just make things a small bit harder again for them next year, because they'll probably fly through the league again. They'll get to a quarter-final and semi-final untested, and they'll come up against a big team again, and it just makes it harder every year if you're getting better in a semi-final. So this is a big game for them, really big game for them. And like you said, Dublin going in as underdogs is kind of unthinkable almost, and they'll probably relish that a small bit, you know. So they will come out all guns blazing, there's no doubt about it. So the first 15-20 minutes especially are going to be fascinating, because there are going to be an awful lot happening, I'd say, both on and off the ball. So it's going to be a brilliant one to watch.
Yeah, quick word on the Townsend Cup final as well. It's been a good addition to the championship this year. You know, Cavan Westmeath getting 5-6 games like this. You know, Cavan Westmeath are, you know, in the 6 teams that are left, which, you know, when's the last time that's happened, you know, playing football in the championship. So again, it should be another good game of football. You know, Westmeath put up a big score against Offaly the last day, and Cavan struggled at times against Sligo, but they're probably just that maybe tad bit ahead of Westmeath, maybe conditioning wise even could come down to that.
Yeah, and just on the Tailteann Cup, look, I think this is only the start for it now. I think, you know, this is only going to go from strength to strength. That would be my general thoughts on it. I think next year you're going to see a lot more teams really throwing everything at it. especially when there's a group stage. And you mentioned teams getting more games, and that's what it's all about. But just on the final, it's a hard one to call. I was really, really impressed with Westmeath, I have to say, in that semi-final. Offaly were poor though. They didn't show up, and they never really push any pressure on Westmeath or put them to the pin of their collar like Cavan will the next day. Cavan weren't overly impressive in that semi-final against Sligo, but look, it just did enough. It was interesting actually, the amount of goal chances they conceded in that game, which is kind of untypical of Cavan. They're usually watertight at the back, so that's one area I think they'll really be looking for. It's a really hard one to call. Croke Park really seemed to suit both teams. The last day, even Westmeath, I was really impressed with their conditioning and their running ability. So yeah, it's a tight one. I think possibly I'd just give the nod for Cavan, which I think most people probably will, but I think it could be very, very tight, and it wouldn't overshock me if Westmeath took it.
Yeah, hopefully it should be a good final. I mean, last question for me. All Ireland, who's going to win it?
Yeah, it's I still would have Kerry just as slight favourites. I'd fancy them to get over the line Saturday evening and I think if they do, they will be hard stop on a final. I think it would be fascinating to see them against a really defensive team like Derry in the final. How they will cope with that. Didn't obviously cope well for last year against Tyrone, so there'd be huge pressure on them, and you'd see something like Chris McKay picking up Clifford, and that would be fascinating. But I think just at the minute I would have Kerry just a slight favours to get the job done.
Brilliant, Colm. Thanks very much for your time, and catching up soon.
Thanks a million, Dar.